Democrats are eyeing to flip some state houses in 2020 in a way that has not been seen before. The group focused on those races has been ramping up its efforts. The Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee says it is on track to raise $50 million next year. That is 5 times more than the amount raised a decade ago. As Tim Craig reports in the Washington Post, the party is planning a, quote, unprecedented effort to turn state legislative chambers blue in 2020. And Tim Craig joins me now. He's a national correspondent for the Washington Post. Welcome, Tim. We're so happy to have you. What has been Democrats' track record prior to this push when it comes to gaining seats in state houses? They had a sort of top-down approach, didn't they? Did that prove to be effective?
You really got to divide it into 2 different periods of time. The first was under President Obama, starting in 2009 when he got inaugurated. They really took a big hit under the Obama administration of not really prioritizing the state races at all. And this coincided with Republicans investing a lot of money and a lot of time to winning back state houses and control. Under the Obama administration, Republicans gained more than 700 legislative seats. They flipped numerous chambers. I think it's something like 23 chambers, legislative chambers flipped just after Obama was elected. Now, since then, since the Trump administration, Democrats have been clawing back power. They've gained 400 legislative seats in the last 2 years, and they've flipped a number of chambers, especially in the Northeast, where they now control New York, Maine, several others that were not under their control before. So what happens going on from here is, can they sustain the momentum? As we enter a presidential election year, can they sustain the momentum and keep doing what they've been doing the last 2 years?
And Tim, where can we expect Democrats to focus their efforts this time around?
There's really a target about 7 states, and they sort of closely align with what you expect would be the presidential battlegrounds. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Iowa, North Carolina. Even Texas is considered to be in play for them to win back legislative seats. They need 9 legislative seats there to flip a chamber. And that may sound like a long haul, and it probably is a long haul in a state like Texas, but you also got to consider those 9 districts also that are being targeted. Those are districts Beto O'Rourke, the Democrat, won in the 2018 Senate race. So it's possible if they get a big enough turnout, they will be able to win more seats in Texas as well.
Oh yeah, I'm from Texas myself, and it's full. There are areas that are fully purple, fully purple.
Yeah, it's the same thing going on everywhere else. It's like it's the suburban communities. How can many of these suburban communities where Republicans have historically held state legislative seats, can the Democrats take advantage of the demographic changes in their momentum in the suburbs and flip these seats next year?
But when it comes to the actual campaigning on the ground for some of these state seats, is there infrastructure the GOP was able to put in place for years that the Democrats don't have the same infrastructure in place right now?
Yeah, the Republicans invested a lot of money under the Obama administration. Karl Rove had a group that invested a lot of money. The Koch brothers put millions and millions of dollars into this, and really is trying to win back local control of state governments. And Republicans have done very, very well with that. The question is can the Democrats catch up, and can the Democrats spend money? The Democrats note, though, in a state like Virginia, where they flipped control last year, they did. There were candidates running in the outer suburbs of Washington, D.C., representing maybe 50, 60,000 people, were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to air television ads in the Washington, D.C. market just to get their message out. And the Washington, D.C. market covers 2 states. So that just shows you the level of sophistication and the level of professionalism that some of these Democratic campaigns hope to bring if they can raise enough money to accomplish that.
And Tim, you also spoke to the Republican State Leadership Committee. They, of course, helped to elect GOP legislators. Are they prepared for these renewed efforts by Democrats? That organization has been a little bit of a chaos and a little bit of sort of this upheaval since losing so much in the last couple of years. But they say they are. They say, a lot of it's going to come down to the presidential election. If Trump is doing better in many of these communities, which they think he will be, than he did in 2018, they expect to do better. But at the same time, they admit that most of the money and the momentum currently is with the Democrats. And the Democrats have a lot of activists, a lot of volunteers, and they're ready to go in these state legislative races, areas that Democrats traditionally didn't really focus on that much. They focused on the presidential election, they focused on Senate,
But the party's energized, and we'll see if they last through the 2020 cycle.
Right. And something that you mentioned earlier and that you also wrote in your article, the Democratic targets for state legislative victories closely align with the expected battleground states in the presidential contest. So do you think that these races at the local and state level will serve as indicators for what we can expect to see play out on the national stage?
That's a tricky question because a lot of the activists and volunteers will say what they can do now is, we don't know who the Democratic nominee is, but they do know that these districts are going to be competitive. So they can say they can get in there now early on, start organizing, start being volunteers, doing things that the Democrats can't do yet without a nominee, but they can do now in these districts. At the same time, you know, if you look in a state like Michigan, historically to win Michigan, what the Democrats have saw they needed to do was go to big cities, go where the voters are, get turnout up, you know, get people out to vote. That doesn't really help a lot of these state legislative candidates because most of those big city, Detroit, for instance, most of those people are already Democrats in the state legislatures. What they need is more of an effort in the outer suburbs and other small towns, and really to make it a whole state effort to go in there and get turnout up.
Right.
Whether Democrats are going to really be able to invest that much time and attention to do that, it remains to be a little bit to be seen. But the one thing they do have is they're going to have money, and they're going to have volunteers, and they're going to have some resources to at least make an attempt this year.
Now, we've reported,
next year.
Tim, we've reported a lot on the very real problem of gerrymandering, which is something that both Democrats and Republicans are guilty of, and voter suppression. Do you expect any of that to play a role in some of these local and state races, especially the tight ones?
Well, that's clearly going to play a role in getting resources. That's one reason why they're raising so much money is the unions, for instance. AFSCME is a big donor to the Democratic Leadership Committee. And a lot of these unions realize that they really got beat the last 10 to 20 years on redistricting. And not just for the state issues, but for the congressional redistricting and the congressional balance of power. So that's why they're going to be able to raise so much money. Now, whether it resonates with the average voter, I tend to think that's a harder issue. The kind of like many voters don't process the importance of Supreme Court when they go to vote. Other issues would dominate, like jobs and economy. But it's clearly going to at least activate the activist base and the volunteer base and give the Democrats a bit more momentum than they may have had otherwise.
So you're saying in terms of getting, though, people to the polls, which is an important part, right? I mean, they need people to actually get up, get off the couch, and go vote.
Well, it's a presidential election year, so many people who are going to go vote are going to be voting for president. The bigger challenge for the Democrats in terms of these state legislative races is getting people to keep low information voters to keep them voting down the ballot.
Right.
A lot of people go in, they vote for president, and they may vote for Senate, and then they stop because they don't know the candidates, they don't know what to do. You know, they don't know how to the issues farther on down the ballot. What they're going to be spending a lot of time and energy in these competitive districts is saying, make sure you fill out your entire ballot, go down the whole way to the end, vote for all Democrats, they're going to say, and continue the ballot. If they can do that, they may have a much better shot in many of these races.
Yeah, all right, well, we'll see what happens. Tim Craig, thank you so much for sharing your reporting with us.
Thank you very much.